Hello and welcome to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging field of data science. We bring the best minds in data, software engineering, machine learning and artificial intelligence. Now here are your hosts, Frank Lavinia and Andy Leonard.
I've got a topic to kick us off.
Sure.
All right, so I'm gonna change things up a little bit here on you, if that's okay.
No, please do. Like not by not recording an intro.
Well, we could do an intro. Okay, let's do the intro and then I'll change things.
This is a little bit different. We shake things up a little bit.
Well, we can, but you can do the intro and then I'll jump in with like an end of show type thing.
No, I think this is good because last week we had a formal show again with a guest.
That's true, and we're recording
Milena.
Another one next week. So
we are bringing another one next week. So why not mix it up?
Okay, so here we go. I know, Audible is a sponsor,
right?
And if you want to help us out a little bit, Frank's been saving up for. I was trying to think of a good magazine to come up with, a Wired magazine subscription, and you can help him with that by going to thedatadrivenbook.com. And signing up for a free 30-day trial of Audible. You get to download an audiobook. Frank and I love audiobooks. We're kind of hooked on them, and we think they're all. I'm fooling with my mic here, Frank. That's probably not the best time to be. Okay, there. I'm looking at the little needles jump. This is really going to be it's going to be a good show, I'm telling you. So here's why I bring up Audible. Because although I have not listened to these particular books on Audible, I have read them. I think I've read all that are out right now. And I have been watching the series on Sci-Fi. And actually, it's over on Amazon now. I've been binge watching, catching up. And it is The Expanse.
Love that show.
I think it's a fantastic show. But I know you've read at least some of the books. I've read the books. Just from reading, Frank, I love good writing, and it is the best writing I've read. I'd put anything into there, and I've read some classics in the past decade. I'd say it's the best writing I've read in the past decade.
It is easily the best written sci-fi I have read in a very long time.
And I've read some really good books. It's not anything against the other books.
No.
I would put some very popular sci-fi writers, right up there with them, but it's very clever. It's engaging. The action writing is simply astounding.
Right.
The action scenes. And of course, Sci-Fi canceled it or dropped the contract or whatever. Amazon picked it up, said they're going to do it. So Amazon has it now, and I believe it was last week. We're recording this on the 15th of February, 2019. I believe they began streaming the entire 3 seasons. I think it was at the beginning of February, maybe, or
February 8th. Yeah. So I was hoping I would be able to binge watch it on the plane ride back from Seattle. But it was, wasn't really in time, which is just as well as a red eye. I should have been sleeping, which I did anyway. Somebody at work, she was actually on the data point I recorded out there. She was on the same flight back as me, and she goes, "How could you sleep through the turbulence?" And I'm like, "What turbulence?" That's how conked out I was.
Oh wow!
So yeah, I woke up and we were over West Virginia, and I was like, "Oh,
my goodness!" Well, it must have been a great super secret conference.
It was a great super secret conference. Most of it, I actually just didn't get a chance to record anything else because some of it was kind of confidential sales strategies and things like that.
Right.
I think you're going to see a lot of content produced by me. Some of it will leak over to Data Driven. Some of it will end up on Frank's World. Some of it will end up on some of the live in-person events that's coming into the town. I know Azure Data Fest is coming back to Reston on March 22nd. We actually have some things in the books now for another AI fest.
Nice.
Which I think is going to be sometime in June. Okay. Don't want to give an exact date because I forget when it was. And I think we booked the room, we got the room confirmation booked for Fall Data Fest in Reston.
Nice.
Yeah. So there's definitely a full kind of things. Tim McAlilly, who was the former ace reporter for us at SQL Pass, he's one of the big brains behind the event, and so he and I were talking about some strategies and stuff coming out of this conference and stuff like that. And I think a lot of it is that, speaking about audiobooks, is the book that really is influencing my thinking now around AI is probably AI Superpowers by Kai-Fu Lee. Love to get him on the show, but he is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can land him. And the last time we tried to land a big whale, it kind of didn't go well.
Well, it did not. We learned a lot. But
yes, indeed. We learned a lot.
Yeah.
One day we will tell that story.
We will share when there's been enough time. We will share that story. Yeah.
I was thinking about it the other day and I started laughing. And my wife just looks at me like, why? I was like, it's a long story. She knows the full sordid story, but yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, somehow you and me got blocked on Twitter by this guy because some other guy. And it was just like, really? Was that really warranted?
Of all the people, there's people out there who should have blocked me on Twitter who haven't. And this guy blocks me anyway. And you.
And me.
And
you used to follow me at one point, which was
I think you were guilty by association.
Oh,
I got
totally.
you blocked.
Totally.
I'm sorry.
So we have kind of a moratorium on reaching out to big whales for at least the next 6 months till we can kind of do our root cause analysis for that cluster.
Yes.
And I don't mean the server cluster, if you know what I mean.
No.
But we can laugh about it now. Right?
We can.
Which is
but
healthy.
it was just bizarre for a while. That's the best word I could come up with for it.
Yeah, it was, yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah.
So, so the super secret conference that, basically I am one of the anointed people at Microsoft that, I'll call it AI ambassador. And what my role is to help facilitate through our sales organizations and for our customers, kind of AI conversations.
We need a sound effect. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Oh yeah.
We need the angel singing sound effect for the anointed ones.
Let's see. How about this? That's too sad.
Yeah. We don't have a choir.
I don't.
We have to find.
I have the deep dive alarm because we were thinking about this is very much an impromptu show because we had blocked off the time to record with ultimately who was going to be our guest next week.
Right.
But I just turned Annie. It's like, I'm free, you're free. It's the first time we're both free at the same time.
It's been forever. That's one reason why there's been a while since there's been a new show. But
we've been doing the data points.
We have been doing the data points, but the big shows.
The big shows are nice to have, and it was good to do the one last week with Milena because that was. I know it was very much kind of. It was a little bit off our normal beaten path, but I had followed her on Twitter. She actually was someone on Twitter who did not block us after inviting her to the show. But
not yet.
Not yet. Hopefully not.
Hopefully never. But
I had bumped into her at a bunch of DC Tech kind of K Street type stuff,
right,
in DC. So I think I'd actually met her in person. So I wasn't just some random stranger on the internet. So
right.
That probably helped.
I'm sure.
But it's an interesting space because if you read her LinkedIn, she wrote a really good. I meant to ask this of her, but we ran out of time. She talks about how she runs into people all the time, and they ask her, what do you do? And she explains, geopolitical risk, and then, inevitably someone always says, well, I don't need to worry about geopolitical risk because I only sell to X. And if you read kind of her LinkedIn article about it, it's like, yeah, you know what? I think everyone has some kind of touch on geopolitical risk.
Gosh, yes.
Yep. And I don't know. It's an interesting space to be sure.
Well, she has a book coming out. Yeah, it was a fantastic show, and I can't wait to read her book.
Yeah. I can't. Hopefully, she'll have an audiobook too. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That would be awesome. So, Frank, if you want to sound the deep dive, we'll dive into something.
Oh, okay. Why not?
Okay.
This could be a potpourri of deep dives.
Ooh.
I actually helped a customer just now. Actually, literally, you had messaged me like, "Hey, are we recording?" I was just wrapping up a call. I did some troubleshooting on a Databricks configuration issue.
Nice.
Which was fun. Also spent a good part of today playing an R on SQL Server.
You mentioned that, and I would love to dive into that. The first thing I'd like to make our listeners aware of is one of our very first guests is a mutual friend, Kent Bradshaw. And Kent's mother pronounces R with 2 syllables.
R.
It's Ara, the way she says it. Yes, Ara.
Isn't that a casino in Vegas?
I think you may be right.
No, that's Aria.
Aria. Close. But Kent's doing well. He said to be sure and tell you hello.
Cool. For those of you who don't know, Kent and I did the data science capstone project together.
Yeah.
And that was a fun experience. Speaking of which, since the last time we, I think, spoke in person, I completed the AI engineer one.
Did you finish everything in that?
I did, yeah.
Awesome.
I did.
So we need an applause.
I don't have an applause. How about this?
Awesome. That'll do it. Charge, Frank.
Thank you.
Frank and I have all of these back and forth things that we do, little sayings we throw around to encourage each other. And we've both been really busy. We hadn't had time to really chat and message each other. And I feel really bad about that. But one of them is
going on. So
what is? And one of them is no brakes.
That's right.
So there's no brakes on the F train. That's the Frank train. So yes,
it's just a lot easier. Inertia is a very powerful force, and once you're moving, it's a lot easier to keep moving.
So you knocked out AI. Congratulations.
Knocked out AI, and they have a new program now for IoT.
Oh man.
So I started that one too.
So how many certifications are you up to?
36.
Wow.
Yeah. In less than 3 years, so about 2.5 years. So I'm ahead of the one per month. Although I have to get cracking on it because it's been like 2 months since I got a certification. So
yeah, you are slacking, Frank.
I am slacking.
But you have been working a lot, I know. And you had a bunch happen. December was a really challenging month, I know.
Oy. You ain't just whistling Dixie there, man.
We had, thankfully I had a challenging January. You had a challenging December. Thankfully, we didn't have challenges at the same time, but
we time share. I think it's good to do the time slicing, time sharing. For kids that don't know what that is, just ask your local neighborhood COBOL programmer what time slicing is.
That's true. So SQL Server.
R is now available in SQL Server. I've been actually playing with it on SQL Azure.
Okay.
Which you have to go and you have to send an email and request that be turned on. But it works great. I mean, R is not my native language.
Right.
So I actually spent half the time struggling with R and like how to do kind of very simple for me in Python things in R. And read in data from so basically what you do is it kind of works like you basically execute an external script and you pass the R script as basically a string, and it executes it, and then you tell it what kind of the parameter names are going to be for the input and the output.
Okay.
And basically, I mean it reads. You can send it data via a data frame. So, for instance, I did a select star from table name. And yes, I know select star is very awful for performance, but
it's not as bad as it used to be.
Really? Okay.
It's not good, but it's not. So it's more for me. It's not so much. And deviating here for just a second. It's not so much that it matters in performance, although it will if you're trying to squeeze every last cycle out of a query. Yes, because it has to go resolve what does star mean. To me, what bothers me about it as a developer more than a DBA, because I'm not a DBA, is it doesn't communicate intentionality. I want to see what you're trying to do.
Right.
So write the fields out. And if you use SSMS Frank, you can type select and then you can, in a space, and you can drop down the table, and there's that virtual folder named columns. If you drag that folder over and let it go beyond select, it'll put all of the columns, comma separated with brackets around them.
Nice. A little bit of that autocomplete magic.
Yep. And then you just do your from and you're good. You can type from and drag a table name over there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
No
I'm glad you
extra
mentioned SMS.
Yeah.
Because you're the one that turned me on to Azure. Was it Azure Data Explorer?
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
Which is what I've been using to run the scripts in R. Like I didn't
Very
have
cool.
to. Yeah, it was a pretty. It's definitely. It's definitely. I think an Electron app. It's definitely written in the style of VS Code. It's nice and lightweight. I'm told it works on Mac and Linux. So I don't have any of those.
I'm told that too, but same deal.
Haven't
I
tried
don't have either.
I do actually have a couple Linux data science VMs, but what's interesting is that when I'm kind of switch into data science mode, like Linux feels very natural. When I'm in kind of regular mode, it's not. That's
interesting.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's just definitely
a
bit of context switching there. But yeah, so I so what you do is you go in, you spin up a service, an instance of SQL Azure, and or is it Azure SQL? I forget. But anyway, you spin up one of those instances.
Right.
And once you enable it's in preview mode right now. It's probably going to go to GA probably later this year. And you go and you turn it on. You can pass R scripts to it, which was kind of weird. So it's all in a T-SQL kind of shell. But you can write the code. And basically, what you get is it basically uses data frames, because data frames are essentially the same thing as like a SQL result set.
Right.
More or less. I mean, I'm sure there's finer points that they're different, but they're close enough for government work, if you will.
Well, one of the other platforms has some object they call a data frame as well. I'm thinking Spark, something. Python has data frames?
And Spark too, but I'm thinking PySpark. But yeah.
Are they the same?
From the binary point of view, I don't think they're the same. They're effectively the same functionally. That's what Pandas is. Pandas is a Python library,
right?
That's meant to bring the R data frame style of doing things to Python.
Interesting.
And it's the de facto standard of working with data in Python.
Gotcha.
So conceptually it's the same, but I think under the covers and there might be some differences and whatnot.
Okay.
So R is the interesting. I'm sorry, what?
Go ahead, I'm sorry. No, so I was just going to say, you have a data frame, you spin one of those up, and you're using Azure Data Studio to do this, and then hand it. You kind of put a wrapper around this, and then you pass it into Azure SQL R. That you have to write an email right now to have them to turn on for you.
That's correct. And I'll put this in the show notes, like, what to do and stuff like that. And
so it does some R-ish stuff, and then it sends you back some values.
Right. And there's actually some interesting stuff. So I had a customer that was asking, like, hey, we heard you can do this. Can you check it out? But what's actually interesting, I've been reading the documentation, and you can actually you could do predictive modeling in it. So what you could do is you could basically take a query result set and have that be all the features, and then feed that into a predictive model in R, and then have it spit out the prediction inside of another data frame or result set.
So if I'm kind of abstracting here a little bit, I'm trying to take this to the next level. It sounds like I create a data frame, I put it into some process, into some pipe. A data frame comes out. Could I then string a bunch of those together?
What do you mean by string together?
So can I use the output data frame as the input to the next step in the process?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah. Okay. I like this.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I'll send you the script I created because there's no confidential information. It's just
okay.
I made a table with a bunch of random numbers.
If only there was some article that, or a column that you had that you could write this.
If only.
You could write this up for, I'm picking on Frank a little. Frank does the artificially intelligent column at MSDN magazine. It's brilliant. I get to tech at it often, and every single time I learn new stuff. So that's why I'm poking Frank in the eye a little bit about that. That's just me being me.
It's that's actually a good point. I hadn't thought of that. I think that would be an interesting article in terms of how that would play out. What's really funny is at the super secret conference, we all had name badges and stuff, and some guy walks up to me, and he's like, "I know you. You write MSDN. I love that article." So I'm like, "Whoa, cool. That's
nice."
Cool. Yeah. He's doing some interesting stuff with chatbots. So I said, "Hey, you want to be in the show?" And he's like, "Yeah." So hopefully we'll get him on the show. He didn't block me on Twitter yet.
Didn't block you. I was going there.
That's going to be our new kind of like inside joke. Didn't block me on Twitter. We invited him to the show. Didn't block us on Twitter. But
we could count that as a success from now on.
You know what?
It's a smart goal.
It's just not to be blocked on Twitter. Yeah, so that's pretty. That'll be an interesting article. But I think what's smart, because you can add kind of that predictive capacity
right
inside of SQL. And I think I'm hoping they'll add Python, because when I was writing the script, half of the challenge was getting my head back around T-SQL again, because it's been a while since I wrote T-SQL. The other half was wrapping my head around R, because it's been a long time since I wrote R. Right. I love R as equally as Python. Some languages are more equal in my experience than others.
Right.
But it was an interesting thing, and so I just basically what I did was I just took some random numbers and did some basic kind of come up with a mean, and then added that to the result set. So it's interesting, and you can write that to a table or a temp table. I thought it was I think it has some serious power, particularly if you have a lot of analysts on staff who know R, and they want to be able to operationalize their predictive models more easily.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, too, this would give you, if you wrote about this would give you an opportunity to talk some about Azure Data Studio. And right. I think it's pretty cool. I've been playing around in it some recently, and I love the fact that it's extensible. I've written some stuff I'd love to add to it, and I just got to figure out how. So
right.
But anyway, yeah, neat stuff. So, I mean, what else have you been up to? I know you've been doing this R stuff, and you got to see some stuff at the Super Secret Conference you can't talk about yet.
But I think you're all going to see it, because basically what I did was I crafted a plan and created some really cool graphics to go with it, which you're going to see more and more of, I think, in the not too distant future.
Awesome.
And the other thing was Databricks. Databricks on Azure is really cool.
Yep.
It's amazing how fast things can go.
Yeah.
And had a chance to do some configuration troubleshooting today. And with the help of a colleague, I managed to figure it out. So I was super excited about that. Super excited. Nice. Also at the Super Secret Conference was, I know we're bouncing all over the place, but
that's okay.
Graham Malcolm was there.
And we learned a lot from him taking the courses. I took a few, not as many as you, but some of the training over at edX.
Graham Malcolm is one of the big trainers at Microsoft's edX programs. I think he teaches at least a dozen of the 36 classes I took.
Wow.
And some of them, some programs he appears more in. I think the data engineering one, he's in almost every one.
Yeah.
And the data science one, he's like in half of them. And in the AI one, I think he's in one or two of the classes. But so he was there. He taught a class. He taught us how to do neural networks, and there were some concepts for the follow-up article I have in an MSDN magazine. which I have to finish like this weekend.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, by the way, Andy, can you tech review that early in the week?
Sure,
but
drop it in.
I told him I was at a loss to explain certain things, including the loss function, and I realized, oh wait, that's a funny pun.
That is funny.
But the way he explained it was really clear, and it kind of like clicked in my head, and nice. That's that moment where the magic happens. So I invited him to the show. I don't think he's blocked me on Twitter yet either, so hopefully we'll get him on there. He's pretty funny. He goes, he says, I know it's weird when I don't talk at double speed. Because most people when they watch the training, they'll amp the speed up to 1.5 or 2 times speed.
That's funny.
So he was an awesome presenter. In the feedback form, I'm like, we need him teaching like an entire track of stuff.
Really?
Because I had people in there that were just kind of puzzled by neural networks. They were like, and then they were asking me questions, and like after that, it was all being clear. So he's definitely a gem in terms of that.
Oh, he's a gifted communicator and teacher.
Yeah, he's really good at it too. So definitely love to have him on the show. Dude needs his own show, to be honest.
Really?
I think so. You know,
but
let's see. So December was kind of crazy because both my kids have birthdays in December. December is also the holidays, Christmas, New Year's. I also had a car accident, which I think we discussed briefly on the show or on a data point, that totaled my car and had to go car shopping, which is an awful experience. But what's really cool is the car I did get has a sensor package.
Ooh.
And I think I was telling you about this.
Yeah.
So, my dream is to have the self-driving car.
Sure.
But I don't think we're quite there yet for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
But this car comes pretty close to it. And it's not a fancy car. It's not a Tesla. It's not made in Germany. It's a Honda. It's a pretty middle of the road car.
Yeah.
So to speak. It's a CRV, and it has the Honda sensing package, which is now, the last couple of years, I think it's been standard on Hondas.
Yeah.
Where basically it has adaptive cruise control. And it also has a lane keeping feature.
Yeah.
They call it LKAS, lane keeping assistant something.
So does it just fuss at you, or does it correct?
Does both.
Really? Oh, wow.
Really? So if I turn it on, it will fuss at me and correct. And when it corrects and I don't touch the wheel, it fusses at me even more. Like, hey, steering required. Hey, you awake? That sort of thing. It gets you about, I would say, to me, one of the big stressors in driving, particularly, is the stop and go traffic, right? That's very stressful.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of that. What was nice about this is that I can turn on adaptive cruise control in those types of situations. All I have to do is steer.
Wow, Frank.
And I had a chance to test it out on the Beltway.
Yeah.
Stuck between basically Tyson's Corner and Maryland.
Yeah. And
it was fantastic.
That's a great test place.
It is. All I had to do was steer. Unfortunately, it is a great test place. And I tried it another time when we had a bit of snow, and it worked fine until the snow actually blocked the sensor.
Oh, wow.
So then I'm like, oh, wait, I have to manually do this now?
I've got to drive.
Primitive. But I've really gotten accustomed to it, and it's a nice feature. And what was really cool is, unfortunately, we had to go to a funeral up in Pittsburgh in January. But we were driving on the highway, and a big storm was about to blow in. We were trying to get there before the storm.
Yeah. And
but the crosswinds on the Pennsylvania Turnpike were pretty fierce.
Wow.
But the lane keeping assistance tool did most of the fighting for me. So I kind of keep the wheel a loose grip on the wheel, and you could feel it was fighting the wind for me.
Interesting.
And I would test it out by turning it off and seeing, well, what would happen. And it was like, that kind of, you have to fight to stay straight on the road. Yeah. But no, and I turned it back on. It did all the fighting for me. So, I mean, I would say it's not the complete, futuristic style experience, but it takes a lot of the cognitive load off of you.
Yeah.
When I got home after having the car do most of the work in the bumper to bumper traffic, I was not nearly as stressed as I usually am after being in that situation.
I think that's the big benefit from this, right? Is that it just doesn't burn so many cycles in your nervous system. Of course, the engineer in me is yelling in the background, going, yeah, but if, and this is Nassim Nicholas Taleb talking about, that if the safer we make things, the more automated we make them, the less we pay attention, so that when we're needed, we're less ready.
There is something to that generally. However, in this case, I feel that my role as a driver has changed to less of an operator and more of an observer.
Okay.
I don't feel like I'm completely removed from the process.
Right.
But I do feel that my role has changed because I'm always looking at ways like, well, how can this be fooled? And I've already seen some situations where it was not intended to be used.
Right.
Where it would get fooled. So one of the things it does with adaptive cruise control is you can set it to a speed and it'll follow, and it tracks onto the car ahead of you and always keeps a set distance.
Right.
So one thing that happened was I used it, and when that car turned, it got out of the lock, and then all of a sudden the car thought it would be fine and dandy to blast ahead at 40 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
Right. So, I mean, just tap on the brake and it stops, but it was kind of like, if I was not paying attention, it could have been a bad thing. So I can definitely see why there is something to that. You can't just say, well, go ahead, computer, do it. It's not nearly like that advanced.
Not yet.
But yeah, I think it's the old 80-20 thing, right? I mean, 20% of the engineering gets you 80% there.
Right.
That's 20% costs 80% of the effort. I mean, and it's a Honda, so it's at least a third of what a Tesla would cost.
Right.
So I think it's definitely, for me, I mean, the way my accident happened, and I suppose I can't talk about it for, I guess, insurance reasons too specifically, was if someone jams on the brake, let's talk hypothetically now, if someone jams on the brake ahead of you,
right,
you are reliant on the human nervous system, which has a finite speed. Whereas if a sensor can pick that up in a fraction of a second,
right,
and act upon that and make that decision, and remember, human brains operate in terms of milliseconds-ish, hundreds of milliseconds, whereas computer sensors can operate on, billions of cycles a second.
Right.
So you have a significant time advantage there. In fact, I've already been in situations similar to when I did have the accident, where I did have the adaptive cruise control on, and I would think, oh, I should probably put my brake on, and the car was already doing it.
Oh, wow.
The car beat me by half a second.
My goodness. And that's a lot of time at certain speeds. It's a lot of distance.
It is. And so I'm convinced if I had something similar, I probably would never have had the accident in the first place.
Oh, man. Well, the best thing about there's not much good to say about the accident, Frank, but and I'm really sorry you were in it. I know one of your children was with you. I'm just glad you were both safe.
Yeah.
You weren't hurt. I don't believe the other parties were hurt. So I'm thankful y'all are all okay. And it was just stuff. You know what I mean? You can get more stuff.
Exactly. That was the first time I had any kind of fender bender or whatever, or worse, with my child in the car.
Yeah.
And that was a very different experience. So I'm like, so when the paramedics came to me, they're like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, don't want to say exactly what I said. To hell with it. I was like, the hell with me. Check him.
Right.
And that, when he said, he goes like, what happened? He goes, oh, well, we stopped the car. And then what happened? He goes, oh, I dropped my toy. And the paramedic was like, well, you hurt? He goes, yeah, I bit my tongue when it happened too.
Oh.
And he's like, see? He sticks his tongue out at the paramedic. And I was like, I heard that. I'm like, oh, thank God,
Yeah.
But I had actually hit my head on the door frame, which is why I got a bigger car this time. Because every car I sat in, and like, I want to be 2 fists away from the door frame.
Yeah, good thinking.
Because the other one was an Accord, so it was 1 fist.
Yeah.
But it's just trying to be anti-fragile. Speaking of Nicholas Nassim Taleb.
Right.
Which, that's an awesome book, awesome audiobook. He is definitely, I think, one of the great thinkers of our time.
I concur.
If you look for him on YouTube, there's a couple of interesting videos where he's on Bloomberg Television talking about stuff. He's definitely one of the greater thinkers of our time. We would love to have him on the show, but again, moratorium on catching the big fish.
Right. And he has not blocked us.
He is not. We haven't even approached him. I copied him on some things. I think that's actually how I got Milena on the show, is because she tweeted something, and I'm like, I forget exactly what it was. I was like, that sounds like something he would say.
Right. I'm not sure, Frank, but I think I did. I mentioned him in something, and this was years ago, and I think he liked it on Twitter.
Oh, cool.
That's like my brush with, with Mr. Taleb.
Brush with fame.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
But
that reminds me of the time I checked out of a hotel in Seattle right next to Eric Estrada.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was one of my first trips to the Microsoft campus. It's before I even worked for them. I was at I think it was the Hyatt in Bellevue. And I'm checking out, and there's a guy standing next to me. I'm like, I've seen this guy's face before. I couldn't place him. He looks familiar.
It's Punch.
And I'm like, I look over, and he sees me looking at me. He goes, oh, hello. And I'm like, oh, hey, how's it going? I'm thinking it was somebody from the conference I was just at,
Yeah.
And then like somebody comes up to him and goes, oh, your car is ready, Mr. Estrada.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, no way.
Well, it's awesome that he spoke to you,
Yeah. He didn't have that
pretty cool.
I'm too good for you or whatever thing. He seemed really cool. He was being flirtatious with the lady behind the counter.
No way.
So, way. That was sarcasm, kiddies. But it was just like he was doing, like, it was Punch. Like, it was just like, oh, cool. But so that was a pretty cool experience. That was my brush with fame.
Nice.
And greatness. But it's not truly a self-driving car, but it is close enough for my needs right now.
That's interesting, and we know that's coming. I mean, and between now and then, between now and when they get there, there'll be accidents.
Yep.
And some of them will be due to poor engineering or use cases that nobody saw, or an old engineering term called a combination of tolerances, which goes with a combination of circumstances, kind of like stacking the use cases.
Right.
And all of that's going to happen, and some of it's going to be very tragic, I believe. But I would love for us to strive to keep that in perspective. If you want to see a shocking tally, look at the number of people who die on the highways in the United States in a year or a month or a day. Right. It is a larger number than you imagine. It doesn't draw the media attention because, it doesn't have this hype of AI and that sort of stuff behind it. That the very unfortunate and very sad and tragic events that have occurred where people have passed away because a self-driving car hit the big one, not recently, but last year, there was a lady who was killed I believe in the Southwest, and that's horrible.
Well, and that does get a lot of the press, but I would also kind of contrast that against the numbers of other people who were fatally injured in car accidents around the country.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I think that there's some interesting. I blogged them on Frank's World. A lot of interesting talks about autonomous vehicles. That's kind of my fascination of. It was always my fascination, but since December, it's been even more of a fascination because it's kind of become, personal. But I think that there's definitely there's a moral here to. I'm not completely at the point where I have resigned my driving to the computer. I'm having the computer assist me.
Right.
And it's doing things that I'd rather not do.
Right.
Bumper to bumper traffic. It's doing a better job of keeping the distance between me and the car ahead of me in bumper to bumper traffic. It's doing a better job at it.
And, just to interject, is there a way to track how many times the car starts braking before you do and how many accidents it prevents? I believe that's measurable.
I would say if I had an OBD, or what was they called, an onboard diagnostic reader, I could probably sense that. Anecdotally, I would say that it's always ahead of me in terms of braking.
Right.
The only times that I've braked it's not, to be clear, it's not programmed to be, it's not optimized for kind of bumper to bumper traffic, although it does work well there. But when you're in situations where the car ahead of you kind of disappears,
right,
and there's no other car ahead of you, you could easily plow into an embankment if you're doing a turn.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. So you kind of have to, I almost feel like I'm the captain of a ship now, right? As opposed to a driver, right? Okay. Captain of the ship will sit in the chair watching the driver and taking in all inputs, then making executive decisions. I feel kind of more like that now.
Okay.
Rather than actually driving the car. And I think that bodes well for kind of the transportation industry. Even if they do get, autonomous trucks carrying cargo,
right?
There's probably going to be somebody there to handle the situations.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I read an article not long ago that predicted that would be the first place that completely autonomous vehicles would show up, would be in things like transporting food and goods. And they predicted, of course, it would start with kind of large vans instead of, the 18-wheelers. And I could see that. I could see that being a nice segue into being able to do that. There's some solid economics behind that. Just taking the driver out of the context from a just purely economic standpoint. You don't have to pay the driver. If you want to look at this from, say, a more green perspective, and I know there's lots of conversations around that these days. If you make those trucks electric, and Tesla has some interesting proposals out there for those types of vehicles, you can really move the needle, I think, on some economics and on some and on some of the arguments around green thinking.
Right.
Yep.
No, I think the there's a video I saw recently, and I'm pretty sure I blogged it, but it basically works out the math that you would need, in order for people to feel comfortable with self-driving cars, you would need to have something of 1 trillion hours or 1 trillion miles, one or the other, of combined driving with AI without an incident.
And I think that's fair. You and I, see, here's the thing, Frank. You and I know enough about how technology works. We understand enough about the processes that go into engineering. And frankly, we can do the math. We know statistics. And we will get into a driverless car. You and I will do that today.
Yep.
But we both know people who won't and who may never get into a driverless car.
And it could very well be a generational thing. It might take a generation to change. One of our guests, sorry, I cut you off, but one of our guests, I forget who it was, his name's escaping me right now, but he said, at some point in the future, we'll look back and like, wait a minute, you would drive down the road in the middle of the night in the dark.
Mark Tab or Buck Woody? I think it was one of those two.
Yeah, I think so. But it was just like, if you put it that way, it does seem absurd.
Right.
I think it's all about perspective. But I would say if you're in the transportation industry, if you are a truck driver, it's time to start thinking about what would you do next in your career.
Yeah.
Just in case we're wrong. Because a few months ago, I would have said that their jobs are on a chopping block and they've got 5 years. I would say there's still some truth to that, but I say that their role, based on my kind of personal experience and playing around with this, is that their role may not go away, but it's going to radically change.
Right.
They are probably going to have basically just be there to watch things while it's on the interstate, but actually have to take control in the city. Yeah. Or in more congested areas. Yeah. I think that's going to have some interesting benefits because, a car on the interstate the truck on the interstate can drive overnight. It's going to affect truck stops for sure, I think.
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
Because they won't have to stop. I mean, if you just have a thing and you change the cab so there's a bathroom and their stopping time will be a lot less. If they're electric, that's going to change kind of that from gas stations to, will they ever have enough batteries to run across the country on a full charge? I don't know. Yeah. But I mean, it's definitely, if you're in the transportation industry, I don't think it's going to be quite so catastrophic, but it is going to be disruptive. Yeah. And these days, if you tell certain people who were recently laid off to learn how to code on Twitter, you do get blocked.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think it's also very insensitive to just tell people who in a particular industry like coal, well, you should just learn how to code. Yeah, it's not as simple as that. But I think it's time for people who I personally think it's a good opportunity for everyone every once in a while to reevaluate where they are in their life and what they want to do with their life.
Oh, Frank, you and I have both been through this several times.
This is true. In fact, this week, right, we were talking about being anti-fragile, right? And AF, right? Anti-fragile as
Frank.
As Frank, yes. But the idea is the whole notion of anti-fragile is a Nicholas Nassim Taleb concept where as you're exposed to harmful stimuli, you get stronger, right? So the biology is filled with examples on this, right? You lift a 10-pound weight. Next time you do it, you're a little stronger. You can do it. And it's different than resilience, because resilience means he does a much better job explaining this. But resilience means you can work around adversity.
Right.
You can anti-fragile. You tolerate it. Yeah. Right. Fragile, we know adversity breaks you. Whereas anti-fragile means you get stronger because of adversity. Right. That's kind of like a third route.
And we're seeing, he's got great examples, but we see that a lot in studies. I saw one that I think he mentioned as well, where they were doing studies about osteoporosis in women as they age, and they found groups in third world countries that there were ladies that have to walk 4 or 5 miles, and they put the pitchers of water on their head, and that pressure of the water pushing down on their spine actually causes them they are anti-fragile. The bones stay strong. They don't go through osteoporosis like people who don't do that.
Right. On all these well-meaning places where they suddenly get water.
Right.
Which it's a good thing, net. But the unintended consequence is that now the older women are developing osteoporosis.
Right.
Because they didn't have that exposure. Another example is with kids, right? The more you shelter your kids from germs by boiling everything and sanitizing everything, you don't give them the chance to build a strong immune system.
Right.
Now there's probably a happy medium there. You wouldn't want to shove them in an Ebola clinic.
Probably not.
You also don't need to boil everything that, touches their face.
Right. That's,
You know?
Frank, before we get too far from this, I've got a good friend that I want to bring on the show. He's actually working on a paper. I don't want to mischaracterize his work right now, but when you mentioned the telling people who are coal miners that they need to start learning how to code, he's actually very much trying to solve that problem. And his focus is on Appalachia, which is, we have people there. And, we all know people from that area. And it is a shame, actually, what's happening there economically in a country that is as prosperous as the United States. And my friend Anders is actually working on many efforts to try and identify ways that the stuff you and I talk about every time we talk, that can be applied, and that folks in those areas can begin applying it. It's a fascinating study what he's working on. And
right. No, and there's a right way and a wrong way to approach that, right? The wrong way is the way these journalists would basically flippantly tell them it's time to learn to code.
Right.
Yet they're not real happy when it's going to flip on them. I think there's a certain just human decency there that and irony, but I don't want to dwell too much on that. But I also think too is that we are in a time where disruption is now the norm. Yes. And I think it's great that we encourage kids to get into STEM and learn how to code, but who knows what is that going to be valuable 20 years from now?
True.
I don't know. Probably.
Well, the first thing we geeks are going to automate is the things we know best, which
or don't want to do.
Geekery.
Right. Right.
So,
well, also too, geeks are expensive, generally speaking, and
we are.
The ROI on automating someone who's expensive is much more easily determined.
Absolutely.
But no, I mean, that's an interesting point. We'd love to have him on the show. Hopefully he won't block us on Twitter, but you already know him. So
Anders will not block us. I can promise you.
Well, that's good. No, because I think that's an important thing, because Appalachia, depending on where you are, tomato. Yeah. It is a case study in like how not the whole Rust Belt in particular, but
yes,
is a case study in how not to transform.
Yes.
Right. There's plenty of fingers to point, and
sure,
we're already almost at an hour, and there's no point in starting that one now. But there's just there's always a way forward. And there's always a good way forward and a bad way forward. Mm-hmm. And, I was talking to a customer today, actually, and, she is doing a good job of trying to fight the good fight and transform their business into a more data-driven business. Mm-hmm. But she's getting a lot of resistance and stuff. And to which I said, well, you know what? You're trying and you're making progress. Right? This, here's a movie quote, because we haven't had a movie quote in a while, right?
We have.
Was from, was it Rocky III, the one with Mr. T in it? Where he goes, they asked him, like, well, what do you think? What's your prediction for the fight? And then Mr. T looks ominously in the camera and says, I predict pain. Right? And if you look at the pain of not transforming your business,
oh gosh, yes,
Toys R Us, Sears, Kmart, right? There's a whole graveyard, and I think there's going to be a lot more on that list. Or the pain of transformation, right?
Right.
Transformation is not going to be a fun. People think data science. I had another conversation with another customer. You think data science is all kittens, unicorns, rainbows, and truckloads of Bitcoin. It's not. Like, sometimes it's just cleaning up really dirty data.
Right.
Sometimes it's just running 100 experiments and seeing which ones work. Yeah. Right. Sometimes it's being playful with your data. I did a data point on that. Right.
You did. Right? That was a great data point, Frank.
Yeah. Thank you. Sometimes just being playful with it, and you know what, taking out some variables and not really worrying what management's going to say, because they're only going to see the end result of the model. Right.
Right.
It's about slicing and dicing the data in so many different ways.
Yep.
To find the insight. And yeah, there'll be automated tools to that. But I played around with some of the automated tools. There's still some time need to be developed on that. But, the short of it is that kind of getting back into Nicholas Nassim Taleb, like biological systems aren't anti-fragile because they're wonderful and they want to be anti-fragile. They kind of had to evolve that way.
Right.
The first amoeba that encountered something that didn't make it stronger never survived.
That's true.
Right. And if you repeat that process over billions of years and trillions of cycles, if not more, of birth, life, death, ultimately you get to a situation where it's not just the strong that survive, but the ones that get better with adversity are the ones that survive.
Right.
I don't know. I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, it's good stuff, Frank. Good stuff.
Well, this was a bit of a potpourri episode.
I think so.
Maybe that's what we'll call it.
I like it.
Potpourri. So some of the audiobooks that we mentioned was anything by Nicholas Nassim Taleb, Black Swan, Anti-Fragile. He has a new one out too.
Yeah, Skin in the Game.
Skin in the Game, that's it.
Right. He's working on another one. I follow him on Twitter because he hasn't blocked me yet. And I see he posts snippets all the time. And he does these videos on YouTube, the MOOCs. But unfortunately, most of them are not in English. So he speaks, I don't know, so many languages.
He speaks like at least 4.
Yeah. And he, like not only fluent in the language, but fluent in the technical language.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, which is like a whole nother thing. So anyway, he's awesome. But yeah, Skin in the Game, which is, when I listened to the audiobook and you can, from his writing on it, it's almost like he's trying to finish Anti-Fragile. It reminded me an awful lot of the relationship between the books by Grant Cardone, 10X and Be Obsessed or Be Average.
Also great audiobooks, by the way.
Both great. But I listened to Skin in the Game. I'm going back and listening to Anti-Fragile. There's nothing wrong with Anti-Fragile at all. It's a great book.
He actually implied in Anti-Fragile that this is part of, he used a fancy Latin word as he would, about how it's like an opera in several parts or something like that. He basically said that each one of his books is basically a chapter in a much larger mosaic he's trying to paint. And
the word that he used was, I'll probably butcher it, but it's incerto, I believe.
That's it. It. Yes.
Yeah. And he's working on, I think the next book, the one he's working on right now, actually has that word in the title.
That would make sense. He said it would take him about 6 or 7 books to do what he intended.
Gosh,
and
I can't wait.
He's almost at 6 or 7 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great thinker. I think we'll be looking back at him the way we look back at today at Sartre, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, or Kant or Pascal. I think we'll be 200-300 years from now we'll be Taleb will be one of the names.
I agree,
for sure. Yeah. And speaking of 200 or 300 years from now, that's when the Expanse takes place.
That's right.
And I haven't listened to the audiobooks, but I have read them, and they are really good.
Yeah, same here.
I read the first one, Leviathan Wakes, which is roughly maps to the first season of the show. And a short story about the background of one of the main characters, who is actually from Baltimore in the future.
Yeah, that would be Amos.
And
one of my favorite characters in that whole series. Amos.
Oh, he's awesome, man. I don't want to give any spoilers, but I am that man. I am that guy. You're not that guy. I'm
not that guy. I don't know that I mapped me into any of those characters in there, but
no, that's actually the quote from a very pivotal scene in season 3.
Oh, yes.
He tries to stop somebody from doing something. He goes, "You're not that guy." And then, there was a moment of relief of tension, and he says, "No, I'm that guy."
Right.
And then the tension gets back up. One of the best scenes in the series.
Absolutely.
But it's pretty interesting because it talks about what Baltimore would be like 200-300 years from now, or 200 years from now, when universal basic income becomes a thing.
Yes.
It's not all kittens and rainbows, and that's kind of my general thoughts on UBI in general. It wouldn't be all kittens and rainbows.
I think they did it's a mature look at, from an economic perspective, and I think how it works itself out into the culture. And I've never read anything that, that kind of put it in that perspective. I mean, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, right? But in Star Trek's world, the absence of money and everybody just working for the common good was just kind of assumed. There was no downside. It was all, as you said, all rainbows. And they really looked at it and said, no, it's good this way. Nobody starves. But here's some of the side effects of that. Like, you get treated differently if you show up with something other than credits. UBI credits. If you show up with real money, they say, you get treated differently. And it in an effort to reduce classism, it actually creates a new lower class.
Right. And they made it pretty clear in order to get into certain programs and stuff, you had to know somebody, and it was very
right. So it's fascinating. Agree or disagree with the politics and the economics of it. It's still an interesting read. It'll make you think, and the way they portray it, I think, is just, from an artistic standpoint, is just wonderful.
Exactly. So, and getting back to Star Trek, I think Deep Space Nine was kind of the high watermark of Star Trek.
Yep.
Money starts creeping in when you start dealing with life outside of a starship.
Yeah. Which
is essentially a military thing.
Right.
Money starts creeping in. You see it with the Ferengi. You see that with particularly Quark.
Right.
In Deep Space Nine. What was really nice about Deep Space Nine was it dealt with a lot of moral ambiguities, but in a way that's consistent with Star Trek kind of futuristic optimism.
Well, a lot of shows have kind of taken, I'll say this, a lot of remakes or a lot of, new editions of shows have taken a dark turn.
Right.
And the first one that I really picked up on was the remake of Battlestar Galactica, which we watched a couple of years ago. Again, we went through the entire series, and also very well made and stuff. But you have, you have shows like Stargate. I think it was Stargate Universe. I forget, but it was they were trapped, and I referred to that as Stargate Galactica. The Enterprise series took the dark turns. It became Star Galactica. Deep Space Nine was that way as well, and I think it's fair and good that they do that and explore those. But they're fascinating. I want to listen to the audiobook simply because the series is so well done. The books are so well written. I would probably get even more out of the audiobooks. Even though I've watched the series, The Expanse, and read almost all of the books. I don't know if there's one out since the last one that I read, but I'd read everything up until maybe a year ago. So good stuff.
Definitely good stuff. And if you use Audible, thedatadrivenbook.com, we get a bit of a kickback. Helps us run the show, helps us plan our bigger schemes and plans that we have, including webcasts. I think that's something Andy and I both want to do, is more webcasts. Because it would be helpful to explain, hey, this is how you run R in SQL Azure. Here's the script. And here's the setup. Here's the hipster version of SQL Server Management Studio. Right.
That's good. I like that. The hipster version.
Anything written in Electron.
Yes.
In my mind, is the hipster version of anything. I
hear that.
Electron's a great technology, but it's the hipster version.
I got you.
So with that, we'll let the nice British lady end the show.
Thanks for listening to Data Driven. Don't just listen. Become a data driver by going to datadriven.tv to sign up to join the community, access to special events, tips and tricks, and more. Sign up today at datadriven.tv.